Not everyone has a designated bug out location. We don't all own a cabin hidden in the mountains that we can run away to if things get really bad. It's simply not in the budget for most preppers. However, the idea of running off and hiding in a national park or some other public land is a backup plan for many in the prepping community and something to be considered. For many, the idea of going full on mountain man and literally getting away from it all and living off the land is a very desirable notion. That is, if you can actually do it. And that's a big if, folks. So today we'll be taking a look at some of the pros and cons of bugging out full time into a national park or other public lands in order to escape the chaos of a full blown long term SHTF situation. We'll go ahead and get started by looking at the pros first. Number one, you can get a head start now. So, what do I mean by that? Basically, because they are public lands, you can access them now, which means you can gain some familiarity with them now by taking a trip and scouting them out in advance if there's an area you think you may want to head for during an emergency. This gives you the opportunity to find out about water sources, local wildlife, any potential shelter, and so on before you have to try and do it the hard way at some point in the future. Number two, detailed maps already exist. Although you should still scout out the area, let's face it, maps don't show everything, but all the same, professionals have been scouting out national parks and other public lands and documenting them for decades. So, very detailed maps already exist for these areas, which would be very beneficial for if you actually had to live out there for any length of time. Number three, travel routes. Even though national parks are protected lands, they are designed for people to be able to travel through them for tourism and a variety of other reasons, which is one of the reasons why there are detailed maps available in the first place. This means you can find trails that can bring you deep into the land, find backup routes for if you encounter problems, find water resources, abandoned mines, whatever you may need to find is probably already on a map. Number four, they're untouched lands. Well, mostly untouched anyway, aside from hiking parties or work crews drilling for oil or cutting timber in isolated locations. Very few people are deep into wooded areas for any reason. This means you can find untouched resources, particularly water resources, and of course, where there's clean water, there's life. And number five, fewer people. Needless to say that during a disaster that's so bad that you feel the need to run away to the woods, it would probably be in your best interest to avoid large groups of people. Now, whereas many people will end up at public parks, odds are they'll only congregate in mainly public areas. And that's because they're lazy and they're afraid. So it's more likely that large groups of people will clog up the common areas and not really be willing to travel deep into any forests or up any mountains. And now we'll take a look at some of the cons. Even though, as I mentioned in the very last point, few people are going to go deep into the woods or mountains, guess what? People are still going to go deep into the woods or mountains. You're not going to be alone. Someone else has thought of it, and someone else is just as determined as you are. And you don't know these people. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't adhere to the whole notion that people are inherently good. In my experience, people pretend to be good, but rarely are. And with no more laws to hold them back, you could be dealing with some potentially dangerous people out there, and you need to keep that in mind at all times. Number two, the woods are rough. That is to say, that it takes a very unique set of survival skills and a lot of determination to actually live deep in a forest or up in the mountains for extended periods. And by comparison, that weekend you spent roughing it in a tent in the backyard, or that weekend fishing trip you took last year, just doesn't compare to spending months or even years wandering around through the forests playing Grizzly Adams. To live that way successfully takes a lot more than most have to give or are willing to give. And the time to realize that isn't after you've already set up camp for the long haul. Number 3, transportation. As stated in the previous point, the woods are rough and rugged as well. Very rugged terrain makes for very difficult and slow travel. And if you've come to a point where your vehicle just can't go any further, then you'll be leaving a lot of your precious gear behind. The deeper you go into the forests or mountains, the less you will be able to transport, and the more you'll be forced to leave behind. Either that or be prepared to make a lot of long trips back and forth, which could eventually draw unwanted attention. Number 4, the woods are unforgiving. Even though many of these public lands are in pristine condition, that doesn't mean that they're good for building on or growing crops of any kind. Many of these deep wooded areas have been left alone for so long because they're so inhospitable that it wasn't worth it to try and live out there in the first place. This is one of the reasons it's important for you to scout things out in person and not fully rely on the maps. And number 5, you are on your own. I know that you don't want to admit that you need anyone, but if anything bad happens to you, then you are absolutely 100% on your own. Even if you had someplace to go after a serious injury, you would never reach it in time. Once you've placed yourself deep in a natural forest or way up on some mountain, there may be no turning back if you get into trouble or change your mind. Also, whatever you brought with you for supplies will run out, most likely quicker than anticipated, which means you will have to live off the land long term. This is something you need to be prepared for. Once again, this is just some pros and cons for you to be able to make some decisions on your own, and ultimately, that's what you need to do. Make your own decisions. No one can tell you whether you need to go into the forests or into the mountains. That's something you have to decide on your own, and I hope contemplating these points can help you make that decision. So I hope you found this video interesting. If you have any further points pertaining to the video, please feel free to post them in the comments section down below. Please do give the video a thumbs up, easiest way to show your appreciation. Share it if you can and subscribe if you are new. Be sure to hit the bell icon so you can be alerted when new content comes out, and do check out some of the other videos if you get the chance. If you would like to help this channel out, there are links for that down below. Every little bit helps and I sure do appreciate it. By the way, I can also be found on another channel called Coffee Talk. Check it out if you get the chance. There's a link for that down below as well. So all that being said, as always, stay frosty, folks, and thanks for watching.